establishing the dignity of human life, essentially, here. And he's saying human life is valuable. All right? Now, what we just read, verse 9 through 13, said that this was to perpetual generations. This was to Noah and his seed to follow, right? So all these nations follow after Noah. This covenant is before the law, it's before Abraham, it's before all these. There are things that we're going to find in Jeremiah 47 that these nations break in accordance with that covenant. Okay? So, is this making any sense? Is this following through? Okay, just making sure. So, in chapter 47, we're introduced to the Philistines. Now, I'm skipping ahead already, and I need to step back. Because we need to be careful, and I need to be careful as well, because Jeremiah is not going to explicitly state that Nation A or the Philistines broke the covenant between Noah and God, right? He's not going back to Genesis 9 and saying, this is the covenant that they broke. All right? So, it does, though, raise a question, again, that if these nations never received the law, if these nations never knew the covenant of Noah, right? Then how are they judged? And on what legal grounds is God judging these nations? And so that's the question that we're going to deal with this morning as best as we can. All right? So, chapter 47 is the Philistines, a short chapter. And what you're going to find in Jeremiah 47 is that there is no specific sin that is named. All right? It's just a prophecy against the Philistines and that they will be destroyed. All right? But there's nothing necessarily named. So we need to go back, go back in our minds again to a time when we were introduced to the Philistines. What were they known for? They were popular. They had giants, but they were popular. They were one of Israel's biggest enemies at the start of their nation, essentially. But was there anything that stuck out, maybe in 1 Samuel? Anything that may have happened that would have given them an encounter with God working in their nation? Well, there's David and Goliath. There's also the ark. When they bring the ark into their nation, and what happens? They get hemorrhoids, essentially. they essentially get hemorrhoids. And so that's very early on in their history, yet it's still God working in their nation. They also had, like Granny said, David and Goliath. So this isn't a nation that is unfamiliar with God working, right? So 47, we'll just read, I guess we can read all of this chapter because it's only 7 verses. 47 verse 1, the word of the Lord that came to Jeremiah the prophet against the Philistines before that Pharaoh smote Gaza. Thus saith the Lord, behold, waters rise up out of the north, and shall be an overflowing flood, and shall overflow the land and all that is therein, the city and them that dwell therein. Then the men shall cry, and all the inhabitants of the land shall howl, at the noise of the stamping of the hooves of his strong horses, at the rushing of his chariots, at the rumbling of his wheels. The fathers shall not look back to their children for feebleness of hands, because of the day that cometh to spoil all the Philistines, and to cut off from Tyrus and Zidon every helper that remaineth for the Lord will spoil the Philistines, the remnant of the country of Caphtor. Baldness has come upon Gaza. Ashkelon is cut off with the remnant of their valley. How long wilt thou cut thyself? O thou sword of the Lord, how long will it be ere thou be quiet? Put up thyself into thy scabbard, rest and be still. How can it be quiet, seeing the Lord has given it a charge against Ashkelon and against the seashore? There hath he appointed it. So, again, very short. There's some things worth noting here. So in these next chapters, 47 through 51, you're going to find language that resembles stuff of like Revelation, essentially. It is important to remember that this is imagery language. So the waters rise up out of the north. This is not a flood. This is a nation coming from the north to Philistia. And shall be an overflowing flood. It's essentially, there's many, many people coming from the north. Baldness has come upon Gaza. This is not like literal, Gaza is not growing hair. It's that it's desolate. There is the lack of things, essentially. It is gone, right? So baldness has come upon Gaza. Ashkelon is cut off with the remnant of their valley. How long wilt thou cut thyself? So now we get into maybe some speculation in that the Philistines were, historically, they were a very violent people. Cutting yourself was part of a pagan ritual that they did. We could jump to God is judging them for that, but it's not explicitly named. We'll get to nations like Moab here in a minute, and Moab there is something explicitly named. There's a sin that is stated. I do want you to catch this, that in every nation mentioned, with the exception of Babylon, there is going to be a remnant of people. Okay? So, and I'm jumping way ahead, but there's going to be a remnant of people with the exception of Babylon. And I'll explain that later if we get there in enough time. But the Philistines were known for their military strength. They were, again, a very strong people and a very violent people. And if we go back to that covenant that we mentioned earlier, God states that human life is dignified, right? That there is dignity with human life. And so we could say that they're breaking that covenant if we follow that line. But it's, again, a speculation. But hopefully by the end of this, we can put everything together. But we also mentioned that the Philistines didn't lack any witnesses, essentially. They had experiences in their history with God that allowed them to know and understand how God worked, right? With the ark, with David. You can go back to Judges as well if you want to go back that far. But then we move to chapter 48, which is Moab. If I'm moving too fast, please let me know. All right. So Moab. There is a explicitly named sin in Moab, or in this judgment. And I'm trying to find it. I can't remember where it was, but verse 7. Yes, thank you. So in verse 7, the sin that is named, it says, "For because thou hast trusted in thy works and in thy treasures, thou shalt also be taken, and Chemosh shall go forth into captivity with his priests and his princes together." So Chemosh was the national deity of Moab, right? And what's very interesting, if you dig a little bit deeper into who Chemosh was and how it came about, it actually matches very similarly with that of Yahweh, essentially. There's a lot of language that the Moabites used to describe Chemosh that matches Scripture's description of God. There is I forgot what it is, but there's a artifact that was found by some archaeologists, and it was accredited to a Moabite king around 480 BC that describes Chemosh, and it basically gives honor to Chemosh because of victories that were won for land that was given, for promises that were kept, and it matches. It literally is it is a mirror of essentially Yahweh, the God of Israel, right?
Doesn't Moab descend from Lot?
So that's the other thing too.
Or did I jump you down? I'm sorry.
No, you're okay.
I was wondering if that was the connection, how their idol had so much from Yahweh's story kind of co-opted or whatever.
So,
because they come from Lot.
right. So Jake brings up the next point.
Sorry.
No, you're good. I like this. I like this. Yes, this is our segue. So Jake brings up a great point, is that Moab descends from Lot. And we're going to run into another nation that also descends from Lot. But there is, I don't know. It doesn't say, this is the reason, Chemosh matches so well with God's story, essentially, or with the promise. But it is reasonable to say, that because Lot was with whom? He was with Abraham, who received the promise, right? And so it is an interesting thing to look at. It'd be an interesting thing to explore a little bit more. But yes, so Moab is, not just for that reason, but Moab is definitely not unfamiliar with God in any way. Their national deity essentially mirrors the God of the Bible. And so there's no reason to not believe that they were unfamiliar with Yahweh. But there's a sin that is named in verse 7 that we just read over. It was trust in works and in treasures. And what you're going to find is that each of these nations trusted in something. And it was because of that trust that God judges them, that trust in something. What you'll also find, though, is that whatever they trusted in, God removes them from it. So if their trust is in geography, if their trust is in the land, essentially, then what's going to happen is they're removed from their place of dwelling. And they're removed from that place of trust because they're relying on that thing that's not going to give them the security that they're looking for. So Chemosh, the deity, it mentions in verse 7 that Chemosh shall go forth into captivity with his priests and princes together. So that is essentially God saying, this deity that you have as in your nation, that deity is also going into captivity with you. That deity follows you. So I'm not just leaving Chemosh here. Chemosh goes with you into captivity because this is where you've put your trust, and I'm going to show you that Chemosh is not me, is not God, essentially. I do hope this is making some sense, and it's...
Well, if you take Chemosh with you, he's just, God's going to prove that Chemosh can't do anything for you.
Right. And if Chemosh is in captivity, as much as the Moabites are in captivity, well, I mean, you're in captivity. You can't
No
do.
power there.
I have a question. So, you think it's God allowing their trust to be just to play out like I guess maybe an American illustration would be like if when the stock market crashes in 1929 and people who had all of their hope in that, some commit suicide and stuff like that. It's just it just proves that it's not a trustworthy thing. Like you can't actually put all of your eggs in this basket.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like when it says they trusted in their works, like I guess their technologies and their just smarts and stuff like that, and their treasures. So that's what Moab. That's where their stock was. That's what they believed in. And when it failed, it wasn't necessarily like, I don't know, like God is, I'm gonna get you and I'm gonna set you on fire because you didn't trust me. I'm just gonna let your hope dissolve, and then here we are now. When a stronger nation shows up and has more money, now what? Or when a smarter nation shows up and outsmarts you, now what? So I don't know if the difference makes if anyone understands the difference, but I'm thinking like there's a difference that God is not. He's not like I'm not gonna set you on fire because you don't trust me. I'm just gonna allow the failure of your trust, like what you put your hope in, like Proverbs says, hope deferred makes the heart sick. So when and the wicked hope in these things that are just not valid things to hope for. And he talks about all flesh is grass and things like that. That you can't hope in the arm of man and stuff like that. And so the problem is, I think we talked about last week a little bit, is ultimately where the trust is. And if you trust in this rock that can't talk to you, well then whatever happens to you because the rock can't do anything for you. Just like the Pharisees trusted in the praise of men. And so whenever they built statues to the Pharisees, that's what you got. That's whatever you got from people that you trusted. But when they can't bail you out of jail or whatever, then tough luck. Does it make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Question?
Oh, I was gonna say, I didn't hear a question there. No, it makes.
Well, I mean, like I don't know.
It seems that if I understand what you're saying, it seems that oftentimes the judgment of God is a passive judgment, and we always assume that judgment is an active thing, like God is the active agent in judging, like He's stretching out His hand and putting down the nation, as opposed to like a judgment like this, where it's like, hey, you trusted in this, well, guess what? Now this is what you got when you go face death.
Yes. Thank you.
It seems like a passive judgment. The results end up being the same, whether the judgment is active or passive. But the question of is this an active judgment of God or is this a passive judgment of God is a valid question, I think.
Like, is it an actual result of their trust, or is it the result of God saying, "I'm going to get you now"?
Yeah.
Well, He destroyed those cities, it says. The spoiler shall come, and no city shall escape, the valley shall also perish, the plain shall be destroyed, as the Lord has spoken. But then the next verse says, give wings unto Moab, that they may flee and get away. So He's destroying their land, sending them off with Sheosh to say, okay, here you go, get out of here, you're being judged. Physically, you're being judged, your land is being destroyed, but go over here with your God, see how that works out for you.
Right. So all of that
All of that.
put together. So yeah, all that in a bag of chips. Our lesson's over again.
Well, just go
No.
back.
So right. So yes. Trying to remember what the question was.
Active or passive judgment.
Okay. So, thank you, Jake. So, I think, in my opinion, this is, I think God is just like, he's stating an obvious thing, like what you're saying. Like, Babylon has already, at this point, is coming, right? Babylon is coming, right? So he's stating pretty much the obvious, that this is what's going to happen. Because you're relying on these things, Babylon isn't. Babylon is pure military strength. I mean, they are just like, historically, Nebuchadnezzar II was like, he built up Babylon militarily, and they were very, very strong people. Moab trusts in treasures and in works. So treasures essentially buy you out of things. If I exchange things with you, I can maybe buy my way out of something. That isn't going to happen in this case.
Yeah, your money will fail.
Right, yeah. Your money fails because your economy fails because Babylon is coming. So I think it's more of, I guess I would lean more towards the passive, and that it's just like, this is coming, this is what's going to happen, and we're identifying an issue here, like this is what you're trusting in, this is the sin, essentially, this is what's going on. So if you're trusting in this, Babylon's coming, you're not going to get out.
Have more money, Babylon got me.
Right,
They're going to beat you.
right. So, and I forgot what Granny said.
Oh, I just said that the land actually got destroyed.
Yes, so that was the other thing too, is that you'll notice, I mentioned that there's a remnant from most all these nations. The land is what is being punished, essentially. The people are being taken into captivity, yes, but they are physically being relocated so that this land can be, you'll find the land is desolate after they're done.
That's where all the treasures were.
Right, but the land is desolate, so the land is resting, essentially. And you're going to find that throughout all of these nations here. So the next one we move on to is 49. We're running through these really quickly. I enjoy the conversation, so if y'all have anything, just throw it out there. The next nation is Ammon, or Ammon. And Ammon, the judgment opens with a question, and the question is the indictment, essentially. So in verse 1, concerning the Ammonites, thus saith the Lord, hath Israel no sons, hath he no heir? When then doth their king inherit Gad, and his people dwell in his cities? So, if you go back to when Israel was destroyed, okay, Gad is dispersed, gone. Ammon comes in and takes the land, okay? Ammon knows, the Ammonites know and understand that this land belongs to Israel, yet they go in and take it nonetheless. So, the question, why then doth their king is the Ammonites, inherit Gad and his people dwell in his cities? So why is Ammon coming in and dwelling in cities that aren't theirs? They're stealing, essentially. So that question is the indictment. Verse 4, I believe, yes. So verse 4, wherefore gloriest thou in the valleys, thy flowing valley, O backsliding daughter, that trusted in her treasures, saying, who shall come unto me? This is where their trust is located. It's in their geography. It's in their treasures, right? So geography was important back then. It still is today in war. When you are located on a hill or multiple hills, you have the advantage because you can look down. People have to climb up. You have, militarily speaking, the advantage, right? We saw that yesterday in D-Day. We went to go watch Pressure. In D-Day, on most of the beaches, Omaha Beach primarily, the Germans were set up on these hills, essentially, these dunes, I guess is the best way to put it. And they were in bunkers. And Omaha Beach was one of the worst beaches to be on during D-Day, because the Germans were militarily set up better because of geography.
Because it's over Anakin. I have the high ground.
That's right.
I agree.
Yeah, the high ground. Now we start quoting Star Wars here. Oh, by the way, last week, it's episode 5. I don't know if my mom told you. Pirates of the Caribbean, it's episode 5.
Oh, cool.
Yes.
Yeah,
Mhm.
he's like texting me, and I've been sitting
I,
here trying
I
not
love
to cough
all
while
of
you
those
talk.
movies. I had to reference it.
It was my favorite series of all time. Anyways, so back to scripture here.
Enough war movies.
Enough Star Wars, D-Day, and Pirates of the Caribbean. So yes, verse 4 makes their trust explicit. It's in their geography, it's in their treasures. All right? And so God is coming along and saying that, hey, your geography isn't going to save you. And there's also something else that's interesting. Backsliding daughter. I thought that was really interesting. This is to the Ammonites. Why are they being referred to as daughter?
If they also descend from Lot?
Yeah. And it's very interesting. So Moab and Ammon descend from Lot through his daughters? Was it his daughters? Yeah, it was his daughters. Yeah.
They got him
They
drunk.
laid with him and got him drunk.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And that's where Moab and Ammon come from. And so that's also why they're referred to as backsliding daughter, because of that relationship, that history there. And so I thought it was interesting, because it was like, that's unusual language for a nation that isn't that we wouldn't associate with God, essentially. I thought it was interesting, because it is covenant language, really. Yes.
I think it kind of gets to the heart of a misunderstanding, too, of what it means for Israel to be God's people.
Mhm.
Like, when we call them the chosen nation, chosen to do what? Chosen to bring about the Messiah.
Right.
It doesn't mean that they're the only people on earth,
That can do good.
or even that they're the only people on earth to whom God is, like, interested. You know, like, God
Right.
is,
Mm-hmm.
all mankind is created in the image of God. He only ever brought about Israel to bring about a Messiah. That was always the purpose. And so, God can deal with other nations too, because he, like you mentioned at the beginning, he has his other covenants outside the Messianic covenant. And the covenant he gave to Noah does essentially bind all people under God's moral law,
Mhm.
if not the Mosaic law.
All right.
Yeah.
But even like the creation of Israel is to the benefit of the nations. Like when he promises the Messiah to Abraham,
Mm-hmm.
he said there will be a blessing to all nations.
All right.
And so the scope was always international. It was never like, you're my people, you're the only ones, and I don't care about anybody else. Just like Jake said, I'm going to use you for a specific purpose, but my plan is international. It's like global, like everybody. Everybody's going to be involved.
Mm-hmm.
And I notice these nations that he's judging all sit on Israel's land,
Yes.
and they're getting removed from their land.
Yeah, and that's why all the land is getting rest. That's why that's why you see the same language with Judah in terms of the land receiving rest is the same language here with these nations, because they're all on the same land.
And these nations don't exist in the New Testament.
No.
So when he talks about national judgment, it's like the identity of the nation dissolves. There is no such thing as Ammon anymore.
Right.
There is no such thing as Moab anymore.
Yeah,
It becomes
Ammon,
something
for
else.
example, became overrun by what we would call modern day Arabs,
Mm-hmm.
and it's I think it's like Jordan is that region of the world now.
Mm-hmm.
And as a nation, as a sovereign state or whatever, ceased to exist after this judgment.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and in the lineage of Christ, there's a Moabitus in the lineage because of Ruth.
Right.
And the point to bring it up is to say that like backsliding daughter, I think it's only weird because we think of Israel in a way that we're not supposed to think of Israel.
Right.
They're special because they were who God chose to bring about the Messiah, but the scope of the mission, of the rescue mission, you could call it, the redemption, was always the whole world.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, all of these nations are still his.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so that moves us now to Edom. We're in the same chapter, just in verse 7. Is also familiar with certain covenants. Does anyone know where Edom comes from?
Esau, right?
Esau. Why is Esau such a big deal? Hey.
He had the opportunity to carry the Messiah and
Mhm.
give it up.
Yep, for a bowl of soup. Yep. He was hungry.
Well, but the promise was before they were born, though.
It's true,
Very true.
but that's still how it was carried out.
Esau carried the birthright, and then
Right.
he gave the birthright to Jacob for the bowl of
There's
soup.
definitely
Mm.
hatred between Esau and Jacob.
Which-
That's
Which,
the old hatred that's
which
They did become friends again
they did,
later on in life.
but their descendants did not.
No, yeah.
Of which is covered by a prophet in the Old Testament, Obadiah. Obadiah speaks, good old Obi, speaks specifically to the Edomites, and his prophecy is essentially, or the reason for their judgment is because they allowed Judah to be taken. They, in fact, cut off Judah from being able to escape from Babylon. Furthermore, they acted, well, they looted the city of Jerusalem with Babylon. And so God says, because of those reasons, you are being judged in Obadiah, right? And so it's not, again, it's not, the sin isn't explicitly stated here, but historically speaking, you have Esau, who carried the birthright, gave it up for a bowl of soup, and you have that family dynamic early on where Esau hates Jacob, and then they come to terms, but then later down the line, their descendants do not. And God judges Edom because they participated in the destruction of Judah, essentially. And let me see, there was one verse here.
You looking for 16?
Is it 16?
About to cry?
Yeah. Verse 16, thy terribleness hath deceived thee, and the pride of thine heart, O thou that dwellest in the clefts of the rock, that holdest the height of the hill. Though thou shouldest make thy nest as high as an eagle, I will bring thee down from thence, saith the Lord. So, again, this is the sin, essentially, the reason where their trust is located. It's the geography, we're set up in the hills, the mountains, in the clefts of the rock, and so we can defend ourselves easily because nature allows us to do that. And it gives them pride, right, in their heart because they're so, they're just set up in a convenient spot militaristically. And God says, no, Babylon will come through and destroy you as well. In Edom, in verse 17, also Edom shall be a desolation. Everyone that goeth by it shall be astonished and shall hiss at all the plagues thereof. So Edom, as well as with these other nations, with Moab, Ammon, the Philistines, they're all going to be desolate. The land is going to rest, right? Which moves us now to Damascus at 11:30. Uh-huh.
Verse 11, he says, leave your fatherless children, I will preserve them alive and let your widows trust in me. So he is providing a way out for those who are afflicted by Edom, even the people of Edom.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not as if there's innocent bystanders being judged alongside
Right.
those of Edom who are doing the evil. There are those who are in Edom who are innocent themselves, who are victims of Edom themselves.
Who are in Edom but not of Edom,
Right,
essentially.
exactly.
Yes. Yeah.
That's a good way of putting it.
Mm-hmm.
He makes provision for their rescue.
Right. And so that goes back to the remnant part that I mentioned earlier, is that there are a group of people in these peoples that will be saved, that will be allowed to escape.
It's kind of like with the Nuremberg trials.
Mm-hmm.
Those who were judged were like, Nazi officers, people who were
High command.
doing stuff.
Yep.
Yeah. Nazi soldiers just doing evil things. Just general citizens of Germany weren't held responsible.
Right.
Unless they were directly involved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it moves us on to Damascus, verse 23 of the same chapter. This was interesting. Going through this short, it's just 4 verses. But this was really interesting because there's a verse in here, verse 25. How is the city of praise not left, the city of my joy? And I thought that was interesting because it's Damascus, it's the capital of Syria. And it's like, okay, why is this city being referred to as city of joy, of my joy specifically? And you go back a little bit to the time of Elijah in the Kings. There's a man, you have Naaman, and it should be Elisha, but you have Naaman who goes. He is a Syrian officer, and he experiences a miracle, essentially. You have Elisha who anoints a king of Syria because God explicitly asks him to. And so, God put some work into Damascus, essentially, and there's some work going on in Damascus's history. Damascus's, and they're not unfamiliar with God's work, right? In verse 23, concerning Damascus, Hamath is confounded, and Arpad, for they have heard evil tidings. They are faint-hearted. There is sorrow on the sea. It cannot be quiet. Damascus has waxed feeble and turneth herself to flee in fear. And fear hath seized on her. Anguish and sorrows have taken her as a woman in travail. How is the city of praise not left, the city of my joy? Therefore her young men shall fall in the streets, and all the men of war shall be cut off in that day, saith the Lord of hosts. And I will kindle a fire in the wall of Damascus, and it shall consume the palaces of Ben-Hadad. So, another nation, another kingdom, I should say, city really, that is going to be destroyed in the path of Babylon. And there's not really a lot with Damascus. There's not really going to be a lot with Kedar or Hazor either. But they're not unfamiliar with God's work. They have some sort of witnesses, Elisha, Naaman. They have a king that was anointed by Elisha or Elijah. I can't remember exactly which one. But there are people in Damascus history that experienced God's work. And then we get to Kedar and Hazor, and these are also not necessarily like popular places. There's not a lot of history really. But concerning Kedar, and concerning the kingdoms of Hazor, which Nebuchadnezzar king of Babylon shall smite, thus saith the Lord, arise ye, go up to Kedar, and spoil the men of the east. Their tents and their flocks shall they take away. They shall take to themselves their curtains and their vessels and their camels, and they shall cry unto them, fear is on every side. Flee, get you afar off, dwell deep, O ye inhabitants of Hazor, saith the Lord, for Nebuchadnezzar king of Babylon hath taken counsel against you, and hath conceived a purpose against you. Arise, get you up unto the wealthy nation that dwelleth without care, saith the Lord, which have neither gates nor bars, which dwell alone, and their camels shall be a booty, and the multitude of their cattle a spoil, and I will scatter into all the winds them that are in the uttermost corners, and I will bring their calamity from all sides thereof, saith the Lord. And Hazor shall be a dwelling for dragons, and a desolation forever. There shall no man abide there, nor any son of man dwell in it. So, Kedar and Hazor, they are a group of people that were nomads, essentially. They dwelt in tents, and God basically says, again, trying to relocate. I need you to leave and get out of here. I need the land to rest. And so, again, there's really not a lot here with either of them. Elam as well, in verse 34, 34 through 39, which would close out chapter 49. Let's see, the word of the Lord that came to Jeremiah the prophet against Elam in the beginning of the reign of Zedekiah. So here's the one I was talking about. At the time of Zedekiah, king of Judah, saying, thus saith the Lord of hosts, behold, I will break the bow of Elam, the chief of their might. So Elam was known historically for their archers, which is why there's that phrasing, I will break the bow of Elam, the chief of their might. And upon Elam will I bring the four winds from the four corners of heaven, and I will scatter them towards all those winds. And there shall be no nation whither the outcasts of Elam shall not come. For I will cause Elam to be dismayed before their enemies and before them that seek their life, and I will bring evil upon them, even my fierce anger, saith the Lord. And I will send the sword after them till I have consumed them. And I will set my throne in Elam, and will destroy from thence the king and the princes, saith the Lord. But it shall come to pass in the latter days that I will bring again the captivity of Elam, saith the Lord. So, interesting for two reasons. First was, again, historically Elam was known for their archers. And so God is saying essentially, I'm going to destroy even that will be gone. And then also verse 38, I will set my throne in Elam. This is the only nation that receives something like that I'm going to set my throne in Elam. It's basically God saying, it's God asserting his superiority over this nation, right? I'm going to set my throne here. Which moves us to Babylon, which takes up 2 chapters. We are definitely not going to read all through chapter 50 and 51, because 50 is 46 verses and 51 is 64 verses. But what we've gone over essentially is all these nations trust in something different, whether it's their treasure, their geographical location, their military might, something of that nature. Babylon is mentioned last because essentially it's the only nation that's going to be left, really, right, before the Medes and the Persians come in and take over. But what you'll find in chapter 50 through 51 is that basically everything that was listed amongst each individual nation is mentioned somewhere in 50 through 51 against Babylon. Babylon is militarily extremely powerful. Their kingdom is vast. Technology grows essentially underneath Babylonian kingdom. And all of that put together brings about pride. And that is going to be the thing that gets Babylon in trouble, is their pride. Because they trust in so many different things, they believe that these things are going to get them out of something. God says to Babylon, no, that's not going to get you out of this. And it's mentioned in I think it's 29 through 32 of chapter 50. Call together the archers against Babylon, all ye that bend the bow, camp against it round about. Let none thereof escape. Recompense her according to her work, according to all that she hath done unto her. For she hath been proud against the Lord, against the Holy One of Israel. Therefore shall her young men fall in the streets, and all her men of war shall be cut off in that day, saith the Lord. Behold, I am against thee, O thou most proud, saith the Lord God of hosts, for thy day is come, the time that I will visit thee, and the most proud shall tremble, or shall stumble and fall, and none shall raise him up, and I will kindle a fire in his cities, and it shall devour all around about him. And if you read farther, you get into a lot of good stuff about God and the character of God and who he is and his power. But everything that we have covered with Ammon, Elam, Edom, Philistia, all these nations, they're covered in Babylon. And it brings about this pride that they will essentially be destroyed for. And so all these things put together, right? There's a pattern, hopefully, that has emerged from all of this. The pattern is, what we were discussing earlier, is that each of these nations have trust in something that isn't God, right? There is some sort, whether it be geography, whether it be Chemosh, whether it be military might, whatever it may be, there's trust in something. And God is going to remove them. And he's going to show that their trust in that thing is not reliable. Okay? There's also skip my mind. It's going to come back to me. Anyways, it'll come back to me. But that takes us back to the question of on what basis is God judging these nations? Why is God judging these nations? How is God judging these nations? Right? Because a legal judgment, isn't a good judgment without legal basis, essentially, right? So if you go to Romans, which is what Deborah was talking about earlier, if you go to Romans, Paul is tracing the fact. Let's go there. Let's go to Romans. I don't want to butcher this. and it's chapter 1. All right. So Romans chapter 1, in verse, let me see if I can find it. I think it's not 16, 17, 18, 19.
Starts in 18.
Yep. So, verse 18, for the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who hold the truth in unrighteousness, because that which may be known of God is manifest in them, for God has showed it unto them. For the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. Because that, when they knew God, they glorified him not as God, neither were thankful. So we're going to start following this line, this descent, essentially, into what culminates into what Babylon did. So, because that, when they knew God, they glorified him not as God. So we established that all these nations had some sort of witness, right? Babylon had Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Edom descended from Esau. Damascus had Elijah, Elisha, and a king, and Naaman. So these nations had witnesses. So they knew God, but they glorified him not as God. Neither were thankful, but became vain in their imaginations, and their foolish heart was darkened. Professing themselves to be wise, they became fools, and changed the glory of the uncorruptible God into an image made like to corruptible man, Chemosh, and to birds, and to four-footed beasts, and to creeping things. Wherefore God also gave them up to uncleanness through the lusts of their own hearts, to dishonor their own bodies between themselves. So God says, you want these things, here you go. This is the passive judgment, essentially. Who changed the truth of God into a lie, and worshipped and served the creature more than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. For this cause God gave them up unto vile affections, for even their women did change the natural use into that which is against nature, and likewise also the men, leaving the natural use of the woman, burned in their lusts one toward another, men with men, working that which is unseemly, and receiving in themselves that recompense of their error which was meet. And then you go to chapter 2. In chapter 2, verse 14, I think it is, yeah, verse 14. Or let's start in verse 12. Verse 11. For there is no respect of persons with God. For as many as have sinned without the law shall also perish without the law. And as many have sinned in the law shall be judged by the law. For not the errors of the law, or hearers of the law, are just before God, but the doers of the law shall be justified. For when the Gentiles which have not the law do by nature the things contained in the law, these having not the law are a law unto themselves, which show the work of the law written in their hearts, their conscience also bearing witness, and their thoughts the mean, while accusing or else excusing one another. So Paul essentially says here, to sum everything up, how are these nations judged? They're judged by what they know, what they have, not by what they don't have. And what do they have? A conscience, and which is written the law, essentially. The law is written on the hearts. There's also that. But I hope all of that makes sense. I know it was a lot, and I probably made it mumbo jumbo. But I didn't want to make it boring this morning, so.
It's not something that's like, not that you can't teach it, but that it's so like historical, a movement of people, and why, I don't know, it's not necessarily like some kind of earth-shattering,
No, it's not.
it's not, so it's not that it's not, you didn't learn anything, yeah,
But
it's different.
yes, but it's important to remember Paul is not coming up with some new theology. He's not coming up with some new doctrine, some new idea. These nations that we went over embody what he's saying in Romans 1 and 2. These nations are all Gentile nations. These nations don't have the law. These nations weren't given the law, but they have witnesses. They have Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, people like that, Elijah, Elisha. They've, at some point in their history, experienced God working in their nation. And they know God to the extent of understanding who He is. And at that point, most nations reject God, right? And so they're being judged based off of those things. So to answer the question, how is God judging these nations? What is the legal basis? It is the conscience. It is the law written in the conscience, on the heart. So, with that said, are there any questions, any thoughts, ideas? Was that too...
They're walking as far away from God that they can get.
Right.
And they're foolish, and it says that they're ignorant. Because we're God's creatures, and God's trying to show you grace. Every time He shows you grace, you're walking that way, and God says, no, go that way.
Mm-hmm.
That don't quite work.
No.
And I think they just kept going, kept going.
Mm-hmm.
No one's better than the Lord, so.
Mm-hmm.
God gave them enough rope to hang themselves.
There you go. Too much rope.
Basically.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
how much,
Yeah.
I feel like that's how much agency man has. Is
Mhm.
He will literally, you have enough free will, for lack of a better term, but that's it. You have so much free will, and you can actually do enough to destroy your own life.
Mhm.
He will just allow you to make those decisions.
He will help you out.
Well, God showed, He showed during Noah's time the grace. He didn't lock everybody out, He kept Noah.
Mm-hmm.
And they like, we just do so, we still don't learn.
Mm-hmm.
We want to get the way from God.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it seems to be more like their actual choice, because God is not, it's not like God said, giving them enough rope to hurt themselves accidentally. Like,
Right.
He has been telling them through multiple prophets, major and minor.
Right.
He's told them through the law, He's told them through various kings who reinstated the law. Like, this is what you are supposed to do, He's told them time and time again.
You got to learn to repeat yourself.
So it's kind of like, He's explaining to them, if you continue to play with this rope, you will hang yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they continue to play with the rope, He's like, you can fear it.
Yep.
I told you so.
And even in that, he's still providing support to the innocent.
Yep.
And what he's doing is literally just judging the corporate nations,
Mhm.
like the national structure.
Yeah.
of
It's
these things.
the cities, the land. It's not necessarily the people. It's the structure essentially.
Well, they didn't
Like-
put their trust and faith in God, they put everything else.
Mm-hmm.
When there's nothing else but God.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what He's trying to do,
Mm-hmm.
push them into a situation where they have nothing else.
Yep.
Nothing.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's really good, Ben, because it helps. We go through this, like historically. I literally listened to a sermon the other day, going through Revelation and just picking verses out of Jeremiah and saying, yeah, this is America, and this
Perfect.
is. I'm like, we
Perfect.
still don't understand what we're reading. So this stuff helps when you put it in its context and say, this is what's happening, this is why it's happening, and here's the principles that may carry over into your life now. But this isn't you, but there's some principles here that
Mhm.
carry over.
It's like, Christ is
Mm-hmm.
And he says, enter through the narrow gate, for wide is the gate, and turned is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it, but small is the gate, and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few will find it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's what he's telling you. You know, and speaking there, he's, you know, I think he's going back, you know, that's what happens to people.
Mm-hmm.
Pride, their lust, their, I can do it,
Mhm.
and they didn't follow God,
Yep.
follow Jesus, and it's gonna be destruction, because
Mhm.
it's easy.
Yep. That's
Who
what's
needs
most
something I
convenient.
can't see?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I got all this stuff, that's all mine. Why do I need something else that I can't see?
Yep.
so,
Alrighty. Well, that's all I have. Let's go ahead and pray, and then we will disperse. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for the many blessings.